Hello and welcome back to Something Z, and welcome to If Naruto was Raised by Kakashi Part 4. Last time on the What If, the Force of Death took place, and during the Force of Death, Sasuke got the curse mark and Naruto got an extra seal placed on him, both by Orochimaru. But even with these two weakened, Team 7 was able to get the two scrolls that they needed, and once they were able to get the scrolls they needed, they went to the Central Tower, and when they got to the Central Tower, they passed this phase of the exam. Okay, so now that's out of the way, let's jump into the video in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we begin this What If the morning after the last part ended, and early that morning the examiners told the examinees to wake up. And after giving them around 15 minutes to get ready, the third Hokage walked into the room. And when he did, he congratulated them all for making it so far into the exams. Then he told them to follow him into the next room. And when they did, the Genin found themselves in a large arena. And once they were in the arena, the third Hokage told them to line up by their teams. And when they did, they were told that because too many getting past the Force of Death, they needed to do an extra round to cut down the number of examinees in half. Then once the rules of the exam were announced, the first matchup was revealed, revealing it to be Sasuke against Yoroi. Then once the matchup was revealed, the people who were not participating went to the stairs that went to the bleachers, so they could watch the match. And while the people were already at the stairs, Kakashi walked over to Sasuke, and he told him that he already knew what was on his neck, and he told him that if it went off at all, he would force him to quit the exams. So once he said that, he asked did Sasuke understand, and hearing this, Sasuke gave him a nod. And once Kakashi saw this, he walked along with everyone else to the bleachers. And when everyone left and when the two were ready, the match began. And when the match began, Sasuke ran at Yoroi and the two began to do hand-to-hand combat. And the reason Sasuke did this was because he knew that he couldn't use ninjutsu or any of his jutsus, or he would feel intense pain. And he didn't activate the Sharingan because he didn't want to risk unleashing the curse mark. But after a couple minutes of fighting, Sasuke's body felt heavy, and it felt like Sasuke was getting drained of energy. And because of this, he was wondering what was happening to him. And because of this, he began to pay attention to what was happening to him. And after a couple more clashes with Yoroi, Sasuke was able to figure out what was going on. And he realized that Yoroi has the ability to drain chakra whenever he makes contact with someone. And realizing this, Sasuke jumped back and he began to think about what he should do, because he knows that if things go the way they are now, he would lose. Then after some thinking for around 30 seconds, Sasuke was able to remember what Lee did to him before the exams even started. So Sasuke ran at Yoroi and he kicked him into the air. And he began to do a barrage of attacks, with the last one being a kick to the back, which flung Yoroi back to the ground. And when he hit the ground, Yoroi was too injured to continue fighting, making Sasuke the winner of the first match. Then right after the match concluded, Kakashi took Sasuke to a remote location so he could take care of the curse mark, or at the very least keep the curse mark under control. And while the two were taking care of that, some of the matches took place, with the results being the same for every match. But during the sixth match, instead of the match being Shikamaru versus Kin, it was actually Kin versus Kabuto. And because it's an odd number with it being 21, Shikamaru was able to go into the finals without having to actually fight during the preliminaries. Okay, so now skip to the match between Kiba and Naruto. And when the fight was about to begin, Kiba and Nakamaru were on one side, while Naruto was on the other. And right after the match began, Kiba took out two pills, which both he and Nakamaru had won. And once they were consumed, the two got powered up, with both their physical strength and chakra increasing. Then Nakamaru turned into Kiba, and after they got ready, they ran at Naruto on all fours. And seeing this, Naruto made 5 shadow clones, and they all pulled out their swords, and they began to fight. And thanks to Naruto learning from Lee before the exams even began, Naruto was able to somewhat keep up with the two, better than he did in the canon, with him being able to get a couple swings and cuts off on the two. But because of their speed and teamwork, they were able to overpower the Narutos. So after doing a couple fang over fangs, the two Kibas were able to hit the 6 Narutos in a row. And because of that, the clones were wiped out, and Naruto was flung a couple feet back, with him being hit in the gut multiple times. Then once Naruto got flung, the two Kibas kept on attacking him, launching him all around the stadium. But eventually, Naruto got slammed against the wall, and once Naruto hit the wall, the Kibas stopped attacking him, with him landing around the middle of the stadium, walking towards them. Then feeling all bruised and beaten up, Naruto knew that he needed to actually think of a plan, because even if he was able to make an army of clones, he would get quickly overpowered once the Kibas began to attack. Then before the Kibas were able to get to Naruto was able to come up with a plan. So Naruto then made around 50 shadow clones, which all appeared around the perimeter of the arena. Then once the clones were fully formed, they all began to rush at the two Kibas. And because of the sheer number of them, Naruto was able to have the upper hand for some time, with them being able to injure the two Kibas somewhat, with them being able to cut and bruise them even more, making it harder for the two Kibas to move their bodies. But it didn't take long for the Kibas to do fang over fang, allowing them to mow down the army of Naruto clones. Then when there was around 20 Narutos in total, the Narutos all reached into their bags, and they all grabbed a smoke bomb they had in their pouch. And because they were all clones, they all had one. And once the Narutos grabbed them, they threw them at the ground, releasing smoke all around the arena, making it hard for anyone to actually be able to see, even their hands. But because Kiba and Nakamaru have increased senses, they don't actually need to see, and because of that, they were able to continue wiping out the Narutos. And the way they attacked was separated because they wanted to get rid of the Narutos more efficiently, and because of this, it was harder to take out the clones because they were alone. But after a couple minutes, the smoke dissipated enough so the arena was somewhat seeable, but it was still hard to see. And eventually, the Kibas wiped out all the Narutos besides the original. Then once the two Kibas smelled this, they ran towards the center of the arena where they smelled Naruto. But when the two got to the center, all they saw was 2 other Kibas, meaning that there were 3 Kibas at the center of the arena. And seeing this, the real Kiba began to smell the other two to try to figure out which was Naruto. Then after a couple seconds, Kiba punched another Kiba. Then after Kiba punched him, Kiba got launched to a couple feet. Then once he hit the floor, he got engulfed in smoke. And once the smoke was gone, Akamaru was laying on the ground beat and bloody. And seeing this, Kiba was confused, so he punched the other Kiba, making him go flying as well. And when he got engulfed in smoke, it revealed another Akamaru. And from this, Kiba was stunned from confusion. And before he was able to react, Naruto quickly got to his feet and he transformed back to normal. Then once he was back to normal, he began to launch a barrage of attacks at Kiba. And because Kiba was stuck getting hit, he wasn't able to attack back. Then after a multitude of attacks, Naruto began to create clones, ganging up on Kiba. And after a couple seconds, Kiba was on the ground bleeding and bloody. And because he was too injured to continue, Naruto was labeled the winner of the match. Okay, so now we skip past the rest of the matches, and everything we just skipped will happen the same as in the canon. So, Hinata got defeated, Lee's body got destroyed, and Kakashi had to deal with Orochimaru. Okay, so now we skip to when the final match concluded. And when it was over, the getting that passed were shown what the matchups were for the final phase, with Neji against Naruto in the first match. Then they were told that they will be given about a month to train before the next phase of the exams. Then once they were told this, they were told to leave. And when they left, Naruto ran over to Kakashi and he asked him to train him. But hearing this, Kakashi told him no since he would be too busy to train him. So once he said this, he began to walk away. But before he was out of earshot, he told him that he could find someone else to train him, and that if he really wants to train, meet him at the Hokage heads the next morning. Okay, so now we skip to the next morning, and after an hour of Naruto waiting on the Hokage heads, Kakashi appeared, with there being someone walking next to him. And when they were a couple feet away, Naruto was able to realize that the person walking next to Kakashi was a Bisu. And when the two got to Naruto, Kakashi told Naruto that Bisu would train him instead of himself, because he would be too busy. And hearing this, Naruto swallows his pride and anger and he just nods his head. Because yes, he did want to complain about how much he didn't even want to be near a Bisu, but because Kakashi asked him to do this, he decided to go through with it. And after some talking, Kakashi leaves. And once Kakashi leaves, the two go to Ichiraku Ramen, and they ate. Then once they were done eating, the two went to the Leaves Hot Springs. And once they got there, Naruto began to train with him trying to learn how to walk on water. And because Naruto has the Nine Tails even more sealed within him, he has a hard time controlling his normal chakra. So even as hours pass by, Naruto can only do a couple steps before he falls into the water, every attempt. Then after some time, Abisu noticed an old man with white hair peeping into the girls' changing rooms, so he went to stop him. But when Abisu confronted the man summoned a toad, which hit Abisu in the gut with his tongue. And with that one attack, Abisu fell to the ground. And the second he hit the ground, he was knocked out. And seeing this, Naruto ran to Abisu and he tried to wake him up. But after multiple attempts, it was obvious that it was useless, and that he was long gone, so Naruto stopped. Then he asked for the old man's name, which he found out was Jiraiya. And once Naruto figured that out, he told the man that he will have to supervise his training, because he just knocked out his trainer. And hearing this, the old man declined the offer, but after some convincing from Naruto, he agrees. So the two walked to a river that was outside the leaf. And when the two got to the river, Naruto did the same training he did at the hot springs, with the same results, with him at most being able to take around 5 steps on the water before falling into the water. Then after some attempts, Naruto decided to take off his shirt and jacket, because they were both thoroughly drenched. Then once the clothes were off, Naruto tried again. But when he tried this time, Jiraiya was able to see Naruto's stomach. And with that, he was able to see Naruto's seals. And seeing this, Jiraiya saw that he had a seal that was made by the Fourth Hokage. But then after some more looking, he realized that there's actually an extra seal placed on him, one that is blocking his chakra more than it should be. So once Naruto failed that attempt, Jiraiya told him to come to him. And reluctantly, Naruto walked over to him. And when Naruto got to him, Jiraiya seemingly punched him in the gut as hard as he could. But in reality, he undid the extra seal that was placed on him by Orochimaru. Then once Naruto recovered from the hit, Naruto walked back to the river and he tried to walk on the water again. And this time, when he tried to walk on the water, he was able to do it effortlessly. And seeing this, Naruto began to jump and run around, with him still being able to remain on the surface of the water. Then after celebrating for about a minute, Naruto walked back to Jiraiya. Then once he got back to Jiraiya, Jiraiya told Naruto that they were done for the day, and that they will continue his training tomorrow. Okay, so now I skip to the next day, and when Naruto was able to get Jiraiya undistracted, Jiraiya summons a giant toad with a scroll in its mouth. Then he explains that the technique he will teach Naruto is the summoning jutsu. And after Jiraiya was done explaining the premise, Naruto signs the scroll by biting onto his thumb, then signing the paper with his own blood. Then once Naruto signed the contract, Naruto began to train using the new jutsu. And because Naruto knows about cloning being able to increase his learning speed, he has 4 shadow clones doing the summoning jutsu with him. And because of that, Naruto was able to get a better handle at it. It still wasn't by that much, but still faster. So after around 3 days, Naruto was able to summon small toads that were capable of human speech. But even though Naruto was making better progress, Jiraiya saw that Naruto was learning too slow, so he thought he needed to take teaching Naruto to a different approach. So on the next day when Jiraiya met up with Naruto, he was acting weirdly happy, and he did things he wouldn't normally do, such as buy Naruto ramen, and telling him to live today as if it was his last. And after a couple hours, Jiraiya takes Naruto to a different training area, and before Naruto was able to react, Jiraiya pushed him through a bush. And when Naruto was able to open his eyes again, he found himself starting to fall into a ravine. And seeing that the ground was coming closer to him, Naruto began to think about what he should do, but no matter how much he thinks, he couldn't think of something that wouldn't kill him, or at the very least permanently injure him. Then after falling for some time, Naruto still hasn't hit the bottom, and 1 second he was falling, then the next he was standing up, and everything was a yellowish tint, and the floor was completely flooded, and in front of him was a giant cage. And in the cage, he sees a giant face. And seeing the creature, Naruto immediately knew that in front of him was a nine-tailed fox. And once Naruto saw the fox, he saw that the fox was surrounded by red chakra. And seeing this, Naruto realized that the red chakra that would occasionally power him up was coming from the Nine-Tails. Then once Naruto saw this, he shouted at the fox, demanding him to give him his chakra. And after doing a malicious laugh, the fox obliged by sending out waves of red chakra towards Naruto, with it wrapping around him when it made contact. Then once Naruto got surrounded in the chakra, he woke back up in the real world. And when Naruto woke up, on instincts he used a summoning jutsu. And because of the Nine-Tails' chakra coursing through him, Naruto uses the beast chakra in the summoning jutsu, boosting its power. And because of this, Naruto was able to summon a giant toad big enough to fill the ravine, which cushioned his fall. And when Naruto landed, he heard something begin to shout. And when Naruto was able to tell that was the toad he just summoned, he was actually able to tell what it was saying. And it was asking where was Jiraiya. And hearing this, Naruto shouts that Jiraiya is outside the ravine. And with Naruto being on a high from talking down to the Nine-Tails, he talks down to the toad, telling him that because he was the one that summoned it, it has to do whatever he says, which made the toad upset. So he makes a deal with Naruto, which was if he could stay on his back for the rest of the day, he would consider making him his underling. And seeing that he needed the toad's help to get out of the ravine, and because he just genuinely wants the toad's strength, Naruto decided to take up on the toad's offer. And when the toad hears this, it jumps high into the air to the point where they were miles over the cliff. And when the challenge began, the toad just shook around in order to fling off Naruto. But when that didn't seem to work, the toad just increased his power by jumping around. But luckily, Naruto was able to stay on. And whenever Naruto actually did let go and go flying, he would make clones, and they would make a somewhat bridge or rope which would allow him to get back to the toad, allowing him to stay on. Okay, so now we skip to the end of the day, and Naruto was able to stay on the toad's back the whole time. And when the toad declared that the challenge has ended, Naruto passed out because he overexerted himself and he was out of chakra. And when the toad noticed that Naruto had passed out, he took him to the Leaves Hospital, and left him at the front doors. And when the toad landed at the front entrance of the hospital, it made a giant thud. And when the doctors heard this, they ran to the front entrance to see what it was. And when they looked out the front doors, they saw an unconscious Naruto right next to a giant footprint. And seeing as he was low on energy, the doctors took him in for the night so he could be treated. And that's when we leave the What If. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next time on Something Z.